Tonight, we're taking a wild trip not to their epic hunts or grand migrations, but deep into the surprisingly sophisticated and utterly bizarre dining habits of our ancient ancestors. We're going to uncover what really filled their bellies and the mind-blowing secrets that allowed them to not just survive, but thrive in a world where dinner could literally kill you. Forget the simple, raw meat and berries caveman diet you've probably imagined. The truth, revealed by archaeological finds, is far more complex and, frankly, a whole lot more shocking. Our Ice Age ancestors weren't just scraping by. They were interacting with their environment in ways that would be lethal to us today. Imagine, tens of thousands of years ago, every single meal was a high-stakes encounter with nature. The line between nourishment and poison was razor-thin. While we're over here debating organic labels and non-GMO, our human predecessors from 30,000 years ago were casually eating things packed with enough natural toxins to kill a modern adult in minutes. And this isn't some exaggerated campfire story, it's documented fact. Decades of archaeological digs have revealed that our Paleolithic ancestors routinely ate foods with what we would now consider deadly levels of natural toxins. These are the very same foods that, after centuries of careful breeding and processing, we now eat without a second thought. But if you picked them straight from the wild today, untrained, you'd be looking at a swift trip to the ER. Here's the truly astounding part, the bit that should make you pause and think. They didn't just survive these potentially deadly meals. With incredible ingenuity, they figured out how to process them safely. Their tools? Fire, extraordinary patience, and a deep, accumulated knowledge passed down through countless generations. They developed detoxification techniques so sophisticated that modern food scientists are still studying them with a mix of admiration and bewilderment. They literally turned nature's inherent poisons into their daily bread. Archaeological records, painstakingly unearthed across Europe, Africa, and Asia, consistently paint a picture that reshapes everything we thought we knew about prehistoric diets. From wild almonds in the Mediterranean loaded with cyanide, to toxic cassava roots in Africa, and lectin-containing wild beans to solanine-rich wild nightshades, our ancestors were expertly manipulating their environment with every meal. Let's talk about the wild almond. The bitter almonds that grew naturally across vast ancient landscapes contained significant levels of a compound called amygdalin. Chew it, and it breaks down into hydrogen cyanide. We're talking concentrations so potent that just 50 of these nuts could be fatal to an adult. For a child, even fewer. Yet, archaeological evidence from Paleolithic sites worldwide clearly shows these wild almonds were a regular part of the human diet. The processing methods they meticulously developed read like an advanced chemistry manual. They intuitively learned that specific heating temperatures could neutralize certain toxins. They discovered that sequences of soaking, careful grinding, and precise fermentation could transform these deadly plants into genuinely nutritious food. They understood with remarkable clarity exactly which parts of these toxic plants were safe to eat, and which would, without a doubt, lead to instant death. Now let's shift our focus to cassava. This starchy root is still a dietary staple for millions globally, but only after extensive, painstaking processing. The wild varieties, the ones our ancestors first encountered, contained enough cyanogenic glycosides to induce paralysis, cause irreversible nerve damage, and ultimately lead to death. Yet, Our ancestors developed multi-step detoxification processes so remarkably effective that they are, in essence, still used in the Amazon basin today, thousands upon thousands of years later. Perhaps one of the most revolutionary discoveries comes from the meticulous analysis of dental calculus. Scientists can now, with incredible precision, extract and identify the minute plant materials that became stuck in the ancient teeth of our predecessors. What they are revealing is completely rewriting the story of human survival. Our ancestors, it turns out, weren't just consuming these dangerous foods occasionally out of sheer desperation. They were consuming them regularly, systematically, as foundational dietary staples. And here perhaps is the truly unsettling part, the thought that should linger. Many of these very same plants continue to grow wild today, in the exact same regions. The profound difference, the silent chasm between their world and ours is simply this. We, modern humanity, have largely forgotten how to process them safely. The intricate knowledge that our ancestors patiently spent millennia perfecting has, for the most part, been lost to the majority of modern humanity. In our comfort and convenience, we've become so utterly dependent on industrial agriculture and pre-processed foods that we have, quite literally, lost the fundamental ability to survive on what our ancestors considered normal, everyday sustenance. Take as another example raw kidney beans. These contain phytohemagglutinin at levels that can induce severe toxicity from consuming just 4 or 5 beans. Yet evidence of legumes has been found at Paleolithic sites across the globe. Our ancestors possessed a deep practical understanding, a forgotten wisdom about preparation methods that effectively neutralized these potent natural toxins. The implications are, in truth, staggering. Modern humans, with all our sophisticated technology and vast scientific knowledge, are, in many fundamental ways, less capable of surviving in the unvarnished natural world than our so-called primitive ancestors. We have, in our pursuit of comfort, traded essential survival skills for fleeting convenience. We have exchanged invaluable traditional knowledge for the sterile efficiency of industrial processing. Even more unsettling, some scientists suggest that our ancestors' prolonged exposure to these natural toxins may have subtly contributed to specific genetic adaptations within the human lineage. Adaptations that we, through our modern diets, might now be gradually losing. Their regular consumption of these challenging foods may have, over vast stretches of time, subtly selected for robust digestive capabilities and efficient detoxification pathways. This isn't merely academic curiosity. Its relevance is growing with each passing year. As climate change relentlessly threatens global food systems, and as our elaborate supply chains become increasingly fragile, understanding how our ancestors managed to survive on foods we now deem inedible could once again become crucial, life-sustaining knowledge. The archaeological evidence speaks with clarity. Our ancestors existed in a world where the precise difference between food and poison was, more often than not, simply a matter of profound knowledge and meticulous preparation. They navigated this intricate, potentially deadly landscape with success for hundreds of thousands of years. The question, therefore, isn't truly whether they were tougher than us. The question rather is what unfolds when we, in our modern fragility, once again face a world where such forgotten knowledge becomes absolutely necessary for our very survival. But here, the narrative takes a truly astonishing turn. While our ancestors were painstakingly learning to disarm these deadly wild almonds, they were simultaneously developing what might be considered humanity's most profoundly dangerous yet utterly essential food obsession. Picture this, in your mind's eye, as you gently drift, a time of gnawing hunger. The reindeer herds, perhaps, have vanished early, and the stark grip of winter begins to close in like a frozen silent fist. Then, a memory stirs within someone in the small band, the massive starchy roots that grow near the river's edge. Cassava, sweet, abundant, seemingly a godsend. Yet there is one small, incredibly significant problem. This root, in its wild, unprocessed state, is essentially pure cyanide wrapped in plant fibre. The numbers, when considered, are genuinely unsettling. Modern bitter cassava, the kind found in the wild, can contain up to 400 milligrams of hydrogen cyanide per kilogram. To place this into perspective, the acute lethal dose for a human is merely 0.5 to 3.5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. A calculation reveals that a single, poorly processed cassava root could, with silent efficiency, extinguish an entire family. Yet somehow, our Paleolithic ancestors not only managed to eat this botanical poison factory, this silent killer, but they transformed it into a cornerstone of their diet. The processing method they developed was so incredibly sophisticated that it would perhaps bring a tear of admiration to the eye of a modern food scientist. First, they would patiently grind the cassava into fine shreds, using simple yet effective stone tools. Then came the crucial, repetitive steps of washing, squeezing and draining, again and again, in specially woven baskets. This deliberate action slowly released more and more of the cyanide compounds, and the repeated rinsing carried them away, like nature's most dangerously patient laundry cycle. But here, perhaps, is the part that should resonate with a sense of profound awe, and perhaps a touch of apprehension. Without this exact, meticulous process, cassava consumption is simply a sentence of death. We are speaking of rapid respiration, a silent dropping of blood pressure, the subtle onset of convulsions, and ultimately, death itself. Children, with their smaller body size, are particularly vulnerable to its effects. Even in recent times, in 2017, a tragedy unfolded in Uganda when improperly processed cassava flour led to the deaths of 2 individuals and sickened 98 others. These were not ancient humans with their limited knowledge. These were modern people living in our era with all our scientific understanding, and they still, tragically, got it wrong. The archaeological evidence suggests that our ancestors were, in a very real sense, playing Russian roulette with their dinner on a daily basis. Yet, they did not just survive this culinary minefield, they thrived on it. Because here is what is truly mind-bending about Paleolithic food culture. They were not merely eating 1 or 2 dangerous foods. They were systematically incorporating dozens of potentially lethal plants into their regular everyday diet. Consider for a moment kidney beans. Sounds utterly harmless, does it not? Wrong. Raw kidney beans contain a compound known as phytohemagglutinin. This substance is so toxic that consuming just 4 or 5 raw beans can trigger extreme nausea, violent vomiting and severe diarrhea. This compound is so potent that it can literally alter your cellular metabolism. It binds to the lining of your digestive tract, causing dramatic structural changes in your small intestine. It is, in a profound sense, like biological warfare at the very cellular level. But Paleolithic humans did not just eat these occasionally. Archaeological evidence from sites across Europe clearly shows that legumes were, in fact, a dietary staple. They were regularly consuming foods that would, without the proper preparation techniques, easily hospitalize modern humans. The crucial difference. They had patiently perfected cooking methods over generations of diligent trial and error, methods that, very often, represented the subtle yet absolute difference between a nutritious, life-sustaining meal and a painful, agonizing death. And then there are elderberries, beautiful to behold, rich in antioxidants, yet absolutely loaded with cyanogenic compounds. Their leaves, bark, and seeds contain a compound called sambanigrin, which upon digestion breaks down into hydrogen cyanide. Modern researchers, in their pursuit of knowledge, have tested raw elderberry juice on themselves. Most reported feeling violently nauseous within mere minutes of ingestion. We still do not fully comprehend why this reaction occurs. But here is the archaeological bombshell, the revelation. At one site on the Oregon coast, researchers discovered over 68,000 elderberry seeds. Not just a few scattered remains, but evidence of industrial-scale processing. These ancient people were harvesting and preparing elderberries en masse, somehow, with a profound unspoken wisdom, managing to extract the vital nutrition while skillfully avoiding the very toxic compounds that made modern scientists ill. The underlying pattern, when one steps back and contemplates the broader picture, becomes subtly clear. Our Paleolithic ancestors were not merely brave, nor were they simply lucky. They were, in essence, biochemical engineers, working without the benefit of laboratories, developing incredibly complex detoxification processes through pure, patient, and often costly experimentation. Every single technique they painstakingly perfected represented countless generations of accumulated knowledge. Knowledge undoubtedly paid for with numerous silent deaths along the way. Consider, in your contemplation, the immense learning curve. Someone, somewhere, had to be the very first to gently try heating stones to specific temperatures for cassava processing. Someone had to, with patient observation, discover that elderberry toxicity could be significantly reduced through fermentation. Someone had to, through diligent trial, figure out that kidney beans absolutely needed to be boiled at precisely the right temperature for precisely the right amount of time. Each breakthrough, each step forward in this ancient science came at a cost we can barely begin to imagine. But perhaps the most profoundly disturbing part of this story is what it subtly reveals about us modern humans. We have become so utterly dependent on industrial food processing that we have almost entirely lost nearly all knowledge of how to safely prepare the very foods that sustained our ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years. The intricate life-saving techniques that kept entire civilizations alive have, in a mere few generations, vanished. We believe ourselves to be more advanced, yet in so many fundamental ways we are utterly helpless. A Paleolithic human could, with confident ease, walk into virtually any environment and instantly identify dozens of edible plants, knowing precisely how to process each one safely. Most modern humans, however, would starve in a grocery store if the packaging were suddenly removed. We have, with a profound and unsettling irony, traded invaluable, profound knowledge for convenient ignorance. The irony, when truly considered, is staggering. Our ancestors developed these elaborate preparation techniques out of sheer, inescapable necessity. They transformed potential poisons into the very means of their survival. Today we are so utterly removed from this ancient wisdom that we consider quinoa exotic and grow nervous about consuming anything that doesn't arrive with a perfectly printed nutrition label. But here is what should, perhaps, keep you awake, pondering in the stillness of the night. Climate change and relentless environmental destruction are subtly yet profoundly threatening our intricate industrial food system, the very same system that has rendered us completely dependent, while simultaneously stripping away our invaluable ancestral knowledge. What then happens when the supermarkets stand empty and we are, by necessity, forced to return to the wild natural world for our sustenance? Our Paleolithic ancestors, were they able to observe us, would perhaps offer a knowing laugh at our predicament, if they weren't, by their very nature, already long extinct. They, with their profound wisdom, faced down cyanide-laced almonds and fiercely toxic cassava roots on a daily basis. We, in our modern fragility, panic if our avocado toast, heaven forbid, contains gluten. The knowledge they sacrifice so much to acquire, we have, with casual indifference, discarded for mere convenience. The meticulous techniques they perfected through centuries of careful observation, we have replaced with the sterile efficiency of industrial processing and chemical preservatives. We have quite astonishingly become the very first humans in recorded history who literally do not know how to feed ourselves from the inherent bounty of the natural world. And perhaps most terrifyingly, we are, with each passing day, running out of precious time to relearn what they so profoundly knew. Every day, more invaluable indigenous knowledge disappears. More traditional preparation methods are sadly forgotten. More fundamental connections between humans and their intricate food sources are, irrevocably, severed. Our ancestors survived by skillfully turning poisons into sustenance. We, in our modern comfort, might not survive having unwittingly turned sustenance into a form of poison through our own ignorance. The question is not whether we can rediscover their techniques. The truly pressing question is whether we will, by cruel necessity, have to, and whether we will, through immense effort, figure it out before it is too late. Because one profound truth remains absolutely certain. The plants themselves have not changed. The wild cassava remains as toxic as it was millennia ago. The wild almonds still contain their potent cyanide. The elderberries still produce those mysterious compounds that, even today, make modern researchers feel unwell. The only thing that has truly, profoundly changed is us. We have perhaps become the weakest link in the very food chain we once so utterly dominated. Our ancestors, with their profound ingenuity, conquered biological warfare disguised as dinner. We, in our modern comfort, can barely handle expired milk. The invaluable knowledge, the ancient wisdom, is still out there. It is scattered, like forgotten seeds, in archaeological sites, and within the dwindling indigenous communities of our world. It resides in the fading memories of our revered elders, but knowledge without practical application, without diligent practice, is merely theory. And theory alone will not save you when hunger gnaws, and you find yourself surrounded by plants that could either nourish you, or with silent efficiency, bring about your end. Our Paleolithic ancestors faced this profound choice every single day. They chose, with remarkable courage, to learn, to experiment, to risk everything for the accumulation of knowledge. They transformed the world's most dangerous foods into humanity's profound survival advantage. We, in our modern era, have subtly yet devastatingly turned that very advantage into a fragile dependence. And now we are about to discover what that profound exchange truly costs. The ancient knowledge, subtly hidden within our very DNA, whispers a terrifying truth. Our ancestors, the survivors of the Ice Age, were not merely resilient. They were, in a profound sense, systematic masters of their environment. But the most shocking discovery is not merely what they consumed to survive the harshest conditions our planet has ever witnessed. It is rather what they consumed that would, without a doubt, bring about your end within hours today. While our attention has been perhaps drawn to the grand sagas of mammoth hunts and the vibrant artistry of cave paintings, archaeologists have been painstakingly uncovering the evidence of a far darker, more profound reality. Our Ice Age ancestors consumed deadly plants, toxic roots, and other poisonous substances on a daily, routine basis. And in doing so, they developed processing techniques of such remarkable sophistication that we, in our modern world, have completely lost the invaluable knowledge of how to make these foods safe again. Tonight, we will delve into 3 fundamental categories of ancient foods that would, without intervention, be absolutely fatal to modern humans, and more profoundly, the disturbing truth about why we can no longer handle what so consistently sustained our species for a staggering 300,000 years. What you are about to discover will, perhaps, fundamentally alter your perception of human evolution, the very nature of survival, and the profound price we have, perhaps unknowingly, paid for the comforts of civilization. The first category that would, without a doubt, claim your life today consists of what our ancestors, with their profound resilience, simply called breakfast cyanide bombs. Picture this, in the soft quiet of your mind. 50,000 years ago, in the region we now know as the Mediterranean, a Paleolithic family gathers for their morning meal. The children, with eagerness, crack open what appear, to our modern eyes, to be simple almonds, the bitter taste making them wince. But they eat them anyway, for their very lives depend on it. These are wild almonds, and incredibly just 5 of these seemingly innocuous nuts contain enough concentrated cyanide to be fatal to a modern child. Recent archaeological evidence from various sites across Europe confirms that wild almonds were indeed a staple food for our ancient ancestors. But here is the truly terrifying part, the revelation. These were not the domesticated sweet almonds you casually purchase at the grocery store today. Wild almonds, in their natural state, contain a staggering 42 times more cyanide than their cultivated cousins. The compound amygdalin, upon reaching your stomach, breaks down, releasing hydrogen cyanide gas directly into your bloodstream. How then did our ancestors, these masters of their environment, survive this daily systemic dose of poison? They developed complex processing techniques that we, in our modern world, have almost completely forgotten. At sites such as Ohallo II in Israel, archaeologists have unearthed 23,000-year-old grinding stones, bearing residue from over 140 different plant species. These were not merely random food preparations, they were in essence sophisticated detoxification laboratories. The process was, in truth, incredibly complex. First, they would patiently crush the almonds, a deliberate action designed to release the cyanide compounds. Then came the absolutely critical step, repeated washing and precise heating, meticulously breaking down the amygdalin before it could, with lethal efficiency, take their lives. One single mistake in this intricate process, one small shortcut taken due to gnawing hunger or fleeting haste, and entire families would, without warning, die convulsing within hours. But wild almonds, profound as their story is, were merely the beginning. In the Amazon, our ancestors, with their incredible capacity for discovery, encountered cassava, a root that, quite frankly, makes wild almonds seem like harmless candy. This starchy tuber, unassuming in its appearance, can contain up to 400 milligrams of hydrogen cyanide per kilogram, enough, with chilling efficiency, to kill an adult in mere minutes. Yet for thousands upon thousands of years, indigenous peoples not only survived on cassava, they profoundly thrived. The processing method they developed was so exquisitely sophisticated that it is, remarkably, still in use today. Women would patiently grate the cassava into fine, delicate shreds. Then they would place it into specially woven baskets for repeated, meticulous washing. The deliberate action of the flowing water gently released the cyanide compounds. But this was only the very first step. Next came the crucial stage of fermentation, followed by careful pressing, and finally cooking at incredibly precise temperatures. The entire intricate process would often take days to complete, requiring a deep generational knowledge passed down through the wisdom of ancestors. Modern people who, tragically, attempt to eat improperly processed cassava do not just become ill, they often develop a debilitating condition called konzo. This is a permanent paralytic disorder that leaves them irrevocably unable to walk. During times of famine, when the meticulous proper processing is, in desperation, abandoned, entire communities can be tragically struck down. Your ancestors, these masters of their world, mastered this complex chemistry without any understanding of molecules or chemical bonds. Then there is the plant that, by all logical accounts, should have claimed the life of every child who ever dared to touch it. Elderberries. The social implications of this considered stagger the imagination. How does one in such a world look at their 3-year-old daughter and with cold calculation assess her caloric value? How does one maintain the profound bonds of family while literally consuming family members? The unsettling answer, it seems, subtly appears in the archaeological record. They developed rituals. At several sites, human bones are found arranged in deliberate patterns after consumption. Skulls carefully placed in circles, long bones stacked by size. This was not random disposal, but a ceremonial arrangement. They were honouring what they had consumed, attempting to create meaning from the horror. Recent microscopic analysis has revealed the most chilling detail yet. Many of the processed human bones show evidence of healing from previous injuries. These were not sick or dying individuals being mercy killed. They were, with chilling precision, healthy people who had been deliberately wounded, then kept alive until they were needed for food. Cut marks on the bones suggest they were bled slowly, a grim method of keeping the meat fresh while maximizing protein extraction. It was, in its stark reality, livestock management, but with human animals. The practice disturbingly continued for thousands of years. Sites across Europe, spanning a staggering 50,000 years, reveal identical processing patterns. This was not a brief, desperate period, but a survival strategy refined across centuries. Different groups developed specialized techniques for human butchery, passing down this grim knowledge like any other hunting skill. At Herxheim in Germany, 7,000-year-old mass graves contain over 500 humans showing systematic butchery. The practice disturbingly survived the Ice Age, continuing well into agricultural periods. Even when farming began to provide stable food sources, human consumption remained a part of their cultural toolkit. Modern forensic analysis has even identified individual specialists, people who became expert at human butchery. Tool marks from specific implements appear across multiple sites, suggesting travelling butchers who processed humans for different communities. Professional cannibals, in the most literal and unsettling sense. The psychological mechanisms that enabled this remain subtly visible in human behaviour even today. The same in-group, out-group psychology that allowed Ice Age humans to consume their own children drives modern warfare, genocide, and social exclusion. We, as a species, carry the neural architecture of cannibals because in its stark reality, cannibalism worked. It kept our ancestors alive through the worst climate crisis in human history. While other human species went extinct, Homo sapiens survived by eating anything, including, chillingly, each other. The taboo against cannibalism, the deep-seated revulsion we feel today, is, in historical terms, an ancient morality, but a recent luxury. It was only possible when food became abundant enough that human meat was quite simply unnecessary. Every human alive today, consider this, descends from cannibals. The genes that enabled our ancestors to overcome their natural revulsion at eating their own children are profoundly the very same genes that flow through your veins right now. We are all, in a profound and unsettling sense, the children of child-eaters carrying their survival programming in every cell. The bone evidence does not lie. When the world froze and normal prey animals vanished, our ancestors looked at their families and, with chilling pragmatism, saw dinner. They made the grim calculations, sharpened their tools, and fed their stronger children to preserve their weaker ones. And disturbingly it worked. We are here today because they were willing to cross every moral line, to break every social taboo, to violate every principle of human decency that we now, in our comfort, consider sacred. Civilization as we know it is not our natural state. It is, in its essence, a thin veneer, a fragile coating over survival instincts profoundly refined in caves, where families, with grim necessity, ate families to survive just one more frozen day. The most successful predator in Earth's long history was not the mighty lions, nor the silent sharks, nor the fearsome saber-toothed cats. It was, with profound and unsettling irony, humans. Humans who learned that the most reliable prey animal, when all else failed, was themselves. We conquered the Ice Age not primarily through advanced technology or widespread cooperation, but through a chilling willingness to consume our own species when, and if, it was deemed necessary. Every moral boundary we, in our modern comfort, think is absolute, was, in their world, crossed by your ancestors. Every ethical principle you hold sacred was without hesitation violated by the very people whose genes ultimately created you. We are civilization, built on the bones of children, walking monuments to successful cannibalism, living proof that survival, in its rawest form, justifies absolutely anything. The next time you hug your child, remember this profound truth. If you had lived 20,000 years ago, and food supplies ran desperately short, That very embrace might, with chilling pragmatism, have been a butcher evaluating meat quality. That is not ancient history. That is family history, written in the very DNA you carry, preserved in the instincts you inherited, subtly passed down through bloodlines that, in their stark reality, survived because they were willing to drink blood. We are all, in a profound and unsettling sense, the children of child eaters, and at the right, extreme circumstances, we could, with terrifying ease, all become cannibals again. You know, the old woman in Gibraltar wasn't thinking about YouTube scripts when she died 28,000 years ago. She was the very last of her kind, the final Neanderthal, watching the same timeless Mediterranean waters that today's content creators casually film their vlogs beside. She didn't, of course, know she was ending a 200,000-year-old story, but in a profound way, her death marked the beginning of ours. Every story in its essence requires an ending to give its beginning meaning. Every script demands that final revelation that makes the entire journey, in retrospect, worthwhile. And when it comes to the foods our ancestors consumed that would, without question, kill us today, we have been, throughout this journey, building toward one inescapable truth. We survived by patiently learning what not to eat, and that invaluable knowledge, paradoxically, cost us everything we once were. The humble cassava root, it turns out, tells the final profound chapter of this story. In the heart of the Amazon rainforest, indigenous peoples still meticulously practice a ritual that can take 3 days to complete. They grate the cassava, patiently squeeze out the deadly juices, rinse it repeatedly, then meticulously dry it in the sun. Every single step removes more and more of the potent cyanide that would otherwise, with chilling efficiency, stop your heart in mere minutes. Miss just one step, and your children, tragically, do not wake up tomorrow. But here is what modern food scientists are only now, with amazement, discovering. The traditional processing methods our ancestors so diligently developed were not merely about removing toxins. They were, profoundly, about preserving knowledge itself. Each intricate technique, patiently passed down through thousands of generations, contained layers of understanding about chemistry, about biology, and about survival that we are even today still trying to decode. Dr. Mark Plotkin, a renowned ethnobotanist who has spent decades studying indigenous food systems, puts it with stark simplicity. These people, he states, were running pharmaceutical laboratories in the jungle for 10,000 years. They understood molecular chemistry, he insists, better than most of our modern graduate students. They simply did not possess the precise words for what they so profoundly knew. Take again the bitter almonds, those 50 wild almonds that could, with chilling efficiency, end an adult life, or the 10 that could, without mercy, kill a child. Archaeological evidence from Shanidar Cave shows Neanderthals were consuming these 60,000 years ago. Not the sweet, domesticated almonds found in your grocery store today, but the wild variety packed with enough cyanide to, quite literally, stop an elephant's heart. How did they, in their ancient wisdom, survive? The answer lies in something we have completely, tragically lost: patience. They would patiently bury bitter almonds in wet sand for months, allowing natural fermentation to slowly break down the amygdalin. They would boil them for days, meticulously changing the water repeatedly. they developed complex leaching techniques that could neutralize poisons we are only now beginning to comprehend. Each method required more time than our entire modern attention spans, demanded knowledge that could not, by its very nature, be written down, and necessitated arduous processes that, to our logical minds, seemed to make no immediate sense. But patience was not their only profound tool. They possessed something else we have, perhaps, unknowingly traded away: the remarkable ability to read their own bodies like finely tuned instruments. Modern humans casually pop antacids when our stomachs ache. Ancient humans, with their heightened awareness, could detect trace amounts of toxins through subtle changes in saliva production. Slight, almost imperceptible, alterations in their pulse, and minor shifts in their breathing patterns. They were, in essence, living human litmus tests, meticulously calibrated through generations of continuous survival. The Aboriginal Australians still quietly practice this profound wisdom today. They possess a technique called gradual introduction, where they will consume microscopic amounts of potentially toxic plants over months, slowly building tolerance while diligently monitoring their body's responses. One elder, with quiet wisdom, told researchers, "The plant teaches you how much it wants to give. You just have to listen." We stopped listening. The transformation happened gradually, then, seemingly, quite suddenly. Agriculture, with its promise of reliable crops, gave us bounty, but we lost the profound knowledge of 10,000 edible wild plants. Industrialization, with its relentless efficiency, gave us processed foods, but we lost the critical ability to process complex toxins. Globalization, with its boundless reach, gave us year-round produce, but we lost the invaluable seasonal wisdom that so precisely told our ancestors when certain plants were safe versus deadly. Now, we can barely handle mild food poisoning without the aid of antibiotics. But the cruelest irony, perhaps, is this: the very same foods that would, without a doubt, claim our lives today are still out there, still growing, still carrying the profound potential for both deep nourishment and sudden, efficient death. And in a world quietly facing the inexorable march of climate change, the fragility of supply chain disruptions, and the growing spectre of food insecurity, that ancient forgotten knowledge is no longer just academic curiosity. It is profoundly survival insurance. The problem is we cannot simply Google how to safely consume wild almonds. This is not information that can be downloaded with a few clicks. It is rather wisdom that must be deeply lived, diligently practiced, and patiently passed down through profound relationships, through layers of trust, and through the kind of long-term, patient thinking that our quarterly report-driven civilization has, tragically, forgotten how to do. Some groups, with quiet determination, are attempting to rebuild this invaluable knowledge. The University of California, for instance, has a program where they are diligently working with indigenous elders to meticulously document traditional food processing techniques before they tragically disappear entirely. Researchers in Australia are carefully mapping Aboriginal plant knowledge, creating invaluable databases of seasonal harvesting windows and precise preparation methods. But documentation, vital as it is not the same as truly knowing. Reading about cassava processing is not the same as intimately understanding, when the tubers are truly ready, how the juice should precisely smell, or what the dried pulp should precisely feel like in your hands. These are skills that reside deeply in muscle memory, in generational relationships, within communities that most of us have, tragically, lost. The last indigenous cassava processors in some Amazon communities are women in their 80s and 90s. When they quietly pass away, 10,000 years of profound pharmaceutical knowledge, painstakingly acquired, dies with them. We are losing vast libraries of survival wisdom at the exact moment we might, with terrifying urgency, need them most. And here is the quiet thought that keeps ethnobotanists awake at night. We do not even truly know what we are losing. Every elder who quietly passes away, carrying traditional plant knowledge, takes with her the potential cures for diseases we haven't even discovered yet, the profound solutions to nutritional problems we haven't yet faced, the vital survival techniques for climate conditions we haven't yet experienced. But perhaps the deepest loss is not merely practical, it is profoundly spiritual. Our ancestors did not just eat food, they had deep, reverent relationships with it. They understood that every plant was a profound teacher. Every meal was a sacred negotiation. Every successful harvest was a generous gift that demanded deep gratitude and respectful reciprocity. We, in our modern world, have simply turned food into mere fuel, and then, with quiet confusion, wonder why we are so hungry all the time. The foods that would, without a doubt, claim our lives today were not merely challenges our ancestors bravely overcame. They were, in a profound sense, the very crucible that forged human culture itself. The immense patience required to process cassava painstakingly taught them long-term thinking. The precision needed to prepare bitter almonds demanded meticulous, careful observation. The communal knowledge required to safely consume elderberries created the strong social bonds that held societies together. Every toxic plant our ancestors learned to safely consume, with profound ingenuity, made them a little more human. And every toxic plant we have, tragically forgotten, makes us a little less. The old woman in Gibraltar, that final Neanderthal, knew something we have profoundly lost. That survival is not merely about staying alive, it is fundamentally about staying deeply connected to the land, to the rhythmic cycles of the seasons, to the vast accumulated wisdom of everyone who came before. She died knowing the names of 100 edible plants, the timing of every seasonal harvest, the preparation methods that could transform poison into profound nourishment. We have, in our modern convenience, gained the ability to order food with a simple app, and tragically lost the fundamental knowledge of what food actually is. But perhaps that is not, after all, the true end of the story. Perhaps the very fact that we are now asking these profound questions, researching these ancient techniques, striving to understand what we have lost, perhaps that is the quiet beginning of finding our way back, because the plants are still there. The knowledge still exists scattered like precious fragments in remote communities around the world. The human capacity to learn, to adapt, to form profound relationships with the living world around us, that is still wonderfully intact, merely dormant. The foods that would, without a doubt, claim our lives today are patiently waiting to teach us again. If we are willing to be diligent students, if we are willing to slow down, to quietly listen, to remember that we are not separate from nature, but an integral part of it. The question, then, is not whether we can survive in a world where wild and dangerous cassava, bitter almonds and elderberries still profoundly grow. The question, rather, is whether we can remember how to be human enough to truly deserve their gifts. The last Neanderthal died looking across the water toward Africa, toward the future, toward us. She could not have known that 28,000 years later, her descendants would need to patiently relearn everything she took for granted about staying alive. But perhaps she would have smiled, knowing that the plants she so profoundly relied on were still growing, still teaching, still waiting patiently for someone wise enough to truly listen. The foods that would, without a doubt, claim our lives today are profoundly the very same foods that made us human. We simply forgot how to hear what they are trying to say. Looking at the quiet, compelling evidence we have uncovered throughout this intricate investigation, we arrive at a truly disturbing conclusion. Our ancestors did not just quietly survive on the foods that would, without a doubt, claim our lives today. They, with profound ingenuity, transformed poison into survival and death into life through knowledge and techniques we have almost completely, tragically, forgotten. The bitter irony is indeed overwhelming. Those cyanide-rich wild almonds that could, with chilling efficiency, kill a modern adult with just 50 nuts. Our ancestors, with their remarkable wisdom, processed them into staple foods, the cassava that produces enough hydrogen cyanide to cause paralysis and death. They developed multi-step detoxification processes that are, astoundingly, still used today, 10,000 years later. Raw kidney beans that trigger violent illness with just 4 or 5 beans. They knew exactly how to prepare them safely. But here is what should, quietly, terrify every one of us. We have, with tragic convenience, traded this profound biochemical wisdom for industrial comfort. We have exchanged 300,000 years of accumulated survival knowledge for plastic-wrapped safety. Our ancestors could, with profound mastery, transform the deadliest plants into nourishing sustenance. We, on the other hand, can barely identify which wild mushrooms might, with silent efficiency, claim our lives. This is not merely about food. It is about a fundamental betrayal of human intelligence itself. Every technique they so diligently developed, every poison they so skillfully neutralized, every toxic plant they so bravely made edible, was, with profound cost, paid for in human lives. Trial and error in their stark reality meant death for the unlucky and survival for the resilient rest. They built a vast library of knowledge, quietly written in blood, and we have, tragically, let it crumble. The archaeological evidence is undeniably clear. Grinding stones quietly showing thousands of hours of plant processing. Fire-cracked rocks subtly revealing precise temperature control for detoxification. Dental calculus containing plant starches that required complex preparation to avoid poisoning. These weren't primitive people stumbling through survival. They were, in essence, biochemists working without laboratories, pharmacists operating without safety nets. But the most chilling revelation, perhaps, is this. We are losing this invaluable knowledge at exactly the moment we might, with terrifying urgency, need it most. Climate change, profound supply chain disruptions, environmental collapse. All these forces threaten to quietly thrust us back into a world where knowing how to process toxic plants could mean the fundamental difference between life and death. And we are quietly walking into that very future with the survival skills of mere children. Consider, for a moment, the profound sophistication we have, unknowingly, abandoned. Cassava processing required a deep understanding of pH levels, enzyme reactions, and incredibly precise timing. Acorn preparation demanded a nuanced knowledge of tannin extraction through multiple, meticulous water changes. Wild potato detoxification subtly meant recognizing solanine levels by taste and appearance. Our ancestors were, in essence, walking encyclopedias of profound chemical knowledge, and we have, tragically, replaced them with simple Google searches and desperate 911 calls. The evolutionary psychologists are, in this sense, correct. We are still, fundamentally, the same species that quietly survived the Ice Age, that transformed poison into food, that extracted profound nutrition from things that, by all rights, should have claimed our lives. But we have wrapped ourselves in so many layers of civilization that we have, unknowingly, forgotten what our bodies and minds are truly capable of. We have perhaps become strangers to our own profound survival instincts. Every time you reach for that perfectly safe, nutritionally labelled, government-inspected food in your supermarket, quietly remember this. You are the descendant of people who could, with profound mastery, take a plant dripping with cyanide and transform it into dinner. You carry their genes, their incredible adaptations, their profound capacity for survival, but you have, unwittingly, inherited a sanitized world that has made you forget how dangerous and how truly amazing your ancestors really were. The question that quietly haunts me isn't whether we could learn these techniques again. Humans are, remarkably, adaptable. The question is whether we will have the precious time to relearn 300,000 years of accumulated wisdom before we desperately need it. Because if history has quietly taught us anything, it is that comfortable civilizations do not profoundly last forever. But the knowledge of how to survive without them, that is supposed to be eternal. We have tragically broken the chain. For the very first time in human history, we know less about fundamental survival than our parents did, who in turn knew less than their parents did. We are quietly moving backward through knowledge that was, with immense cost, paid for with countless lives. And the bitter truth, in its stark simplicity, is this. The foods that would, without a doubt, claim our lives today did not change. We did. We forgot. We chose convenience over profound wisdom, safety over vital knowledge, comfort over essential capability. Our ancestors did not just quietly eat poison and survive. They transformed poison into civilization itself. And we are still, in our present moment, living off their courage, their insatiable curiosity, and their profound willingness to die, so that future generations might perhaps live better lives. The least we can do is to quietly remember their names. The least we can do is to honour their immense sacrifice by profoundly understanding what we have lost. The foods that would, without a doubt, claim our lives today, once kept your ancestors alive. That is not merely a historical curiosity. It is a quiet yet urgent warning. Because the world that, in its abundance, made such profound knowledge unnecessary will not in its current form last forever. And when it ends, we will quietly discover whether we are truly worthy of the incredible legacy our ancestors so profoundly left us, or whether we have, tragically, forgotten too much to survive what is inevitably coming. The implications of this lost knowledge extend far beyond mere academic curiosity or the superficial entertainment of survival shows. We are living through an era where food security has become increasingly precarious, not just for developing nations, but even for industrialized societies that have become dangerously dependent on complex supply chains. When natural disasters strike, when economic systems tragically collapse, or when climate change profoundly disrupts agricultural production, modern humans find themselves completely helpless. Helpless in environments where our ancestors, with their profound wisdom, would have effortlessly thrived. Consider, for a quiet moment, the profound irony of our current situation. We can engineer crops with enhanced nutritional profiles, develop synthetic biology to create entirely new food sources, and transport exotic ingredients across continents within days. Yet, if you were quietly dropped into a temperate forest with nothing but basic tools, you would, most likely, starve. Starve paradoxically surrounded by potential food sources that sustained human populations for millennia. The very plants our ancestors relied upon for their survival would, in our untrained hands, subtly become death traps. This profound knowledge gap represents more than just lost skills. It represents a fundamental shift in human consciousness and our very relationship with the natural world. Our ancestors lived in intimate partnership with their environment, instinctively reading chemical signals in plants, understanding seasonal variations in toxicity levels, and meticulously maintaining an oral tradition that preserved life-saving information across countless generations. They developed what we might quite rightly call an ecological intelligence, a profound connection that modern education systems have completely, tragically abandoned. The sheer sophistication of these ancient food processing techniques becomes even more remarkable when we quietly examine the meticulous precision they required. Take the preparation of acorns, for instance, which sustained countless Native American communities for thousands of years. Different species of oak trees produce acorns with varying levels of tannins, bitter compounds that can, in high concentrations, damage the kidneys and liver. Ancient peoples developed elaborate leaching processes, patiently grinding the acorns into meal and then washing it repeatedly in baskets lined with pine needles, sometimes for weeks, until the bitter taste completely disappeared. They profoundly understood that rushing this process could mean the fundamental difference between nourishment and poisoning. Similarly, the fermentation techniques used to detoxify cassava quietly reveal an understanding of microbiology that would not be formally recognized by science until the 19th century. Communities in Africa and South America developed specific fermentation protocols that not only neutralized cyanogenic glycosides, but actually enhanced the nutritional value of the final product. They knew precisely which environmental conditions promoted the right kind of bacterial activity, how long to maintain the fermentation process, and how to recognize when the detoxification was, finally, complete. These were not simple trial-and-error discoveries. The sheer complexity and consistency of these techniques across different cultures strongly suggests systematic experimentation and careful observation over many, many generations. Our ancestors were quietly conducting sophisticated biochemical research without the benefit of laboratories, developing meticulous food safety protocols without truly understanding the intricate molecular mechanisms involved, and creating sustainable food systems without modern agricultural science. The profound loss of this knowledge has tragically created a dangerous vulnerability in human civilization. We have, without question, traded resilience for convenience and self-sufficiency for specialization. While modern food processing has undoubtedly improved food safety and availability for billions of people, it has also, with quiet irony, created a single point of failure in our fundamental human survival skills. When those complex systems fail, we, modern humans, quietly lack the fundamental knowledge to sustain ourselves, using the very same resources that kept our species alive for hundreds of thousands of years. Climate change is making this vulnerability increasingly critical. As traditional agricultural zones subtly shift, as extreme weather events become more frequent, and as environmental degradation quietly reduces the reliability of industrial food production, we may, by necessity, find ourselves needing to rediscover the survival strategies our ancestors so profoundly perfected. The plants they learned to detoxify and consume may once again become crucial food sources, but the invaluable knowledge of how to process them safely is sadly disappearing with each passing generation. Indigenous communities around the world still maintain fragments of this ancient, profound wisdom. But even these vital knowledge systems are under constant pressure from modernization and cultural assimilation. When elderly knowledge keepers quietly pass away without fully transmitting their understanding to younger generations, we lose irreplaceable information about food processing techniques that took centuries to diligently develop and meticulously refine. The medical implications of this lost knowledge are equally significant. Many of the compounds our ancestors learned to neutralize or extract from plants have, remarkably, become the very basis for modern pharmaceuticals. The same alkaloids that, with chilling efficiency, made wild potatoes deadly, also provided the chemical foundations for important modern medications. The same cyanogenic compounds that required careful processing in cassava and wild almonds are now, in controlled doses, used for certain medical treatments. Our ancestors were, in essence, conducting profound pharmacological research, learning to manage powerful bioactive compounds for both nutritional and therapeutic purposes. This subtly suggests that the lost knowledge of ancient plant processing might contain profound solutions to modern health challenges. Traditional detoxification techniques may have, in their quiet efficiency, created beneficial compounds that we haven't yet identified or synthesized. The fermentation processes so skillfully used to make toxic plants safe might have, in their complexity, generated powerful probiotics or other health-promoting substances that could, profoundly, inform modern nutrition science. The psychological and cultural dimensions of this knowledge loss are, perhaps, even more profound. Our ancestors lived with an intimate understanding of their environment that gave them deep confidence and profound competence in their world. They possessed practical wisdom that made them genuinely self-reliant and remarkably resilient. Modern humans, despite our vast technological achievements, often feel anxious and helpless when separated from the complex systems that sustain our daily lives. Recovering this ancient knowledge does not mean abandoning modern food systems or returning to a pre-industrial lifestyle. Rather, it means developing a more complete, profound understanding of human potential and creating vital backup systems for food security that do not depend entirely on fragile industrial infrastructure. It means recognizing that our ancestors possessed genuine expertise that could profoundly inform and enhance modern approaches to nutrition, food safety, and environmental sustainability. Some researchers and educators are quietly beginning to recognize this vital need. Ethnobotanists diligently work to document traditional plant knowledge before it disappears entirely. Survival schools teach basic wild food identification and processing techniques. permaculture practitioners experiment with integrating traditional food processing methods into modern, sustainable agriculture systems. However, these vital efforts remain marginal compared to the immense scale of knowledge that has already been tragically lost. The detailed understanding of plant toxicology that our ancestors so profoundly possessed, the precise techniques they developed for detoxification, and the cultural systems they created for transmitting this information reliably across generations, represent a form of human expertise that took millennia to diligently develop and could be lost within a single generation. The story of how our ancestors survived on foods that would, without a doubt, kill us today is ultimately a profound story about human adaptability and intelligence. It powerfully demonstrates that our species succeeded not just through simple tool use or social cooperation, but through a sophisticated understanding of biochemistry and ecology that allowed us to truly thrive in environments that would, without a doubt, defeat us today. This profound knowledge represents one of humanity's greatest intellectual achievements. Our ancestors essentially reverse-engineered the natural world, patiently discovering how to safely consume plants that evolution had meticulously designed to be toxic. They developed food processing techniques that, remarkably, rival modern industrial methods in their sheer effectiveness. And they created intricate educational systems that preserved and transmitted this complex information across countless generations. The quiet fact that we have lost most of this invaluable knowledge in just a few generations should serve as both a profound warning and an urgent call to action. It powerfully demonstrates how quickly human capabilities can atrophy when they are not actively maintained and diligently passed on. It shows how technological advancement can create unexpected vulnerabilities by replacing rather than merely supplementing fundamental human skills. But it also subtly suggests tremendous potential for quiet recovery and profound growth. The same intellectual capabilities that allowed our ancestors to master the toxicology of wild plants still, remarkably, exist in modern humans. We have the same profound capacity for diligent observation, patient experimentation, and deep learning that enabled them to turn poison into food and, in its essence, death into life. The quiet question is whether we'll choose to redevelop this invaluable knowledge before we desperately need it, or whether we'll simply wait until crisis, with its stark urgency, forces us to rediscover what our ancestors already profoundly knew. The plants are still there, quietly growing in forests and fields around the world. The biochemical principles that govern their toxicity and detoxification have not fundamentally changed. What we have lost is the cultural knowledge and the practical skills to work with these plants safely and effectively. Recovering this knowledge won't be easy. It will require combining traditional wisdom with modern scientific understanding, creating new educational systems that can transmit complex practical skills, and developing cultural values that prioritize resilience and self-sufficiency alongside convenience and efficiency. But the alternative is to remain vulnerable and dependent, tragically cut off from the natural world that sustained our species for most of human history. The foods that would, without a doubt, claim our lives today once gave our ancestors life. Learning to quietly bridge that profound gap might be absolutely essential for our very survival as a species, and it would certainly reconnect us with one of the most remarkable chapters in the unfolding story of human intelligence and adaptation. So where does this quiet journey leave us today? the reality is both sobering and, in its own way, profoundly fascinating. We've become so utterly disconnected from our food sources that most people can't even identify edible plants in their own backyards, let alone patiently process potentially toxic ones safely. Walk through any modern grocery store, and you'll find rows upon rows of perfectly safe, pre-processed foods that require no special knowledge to consume. We've traded our ancestors' hard-won wisdom for mere convenience, and in many ways, that's been a remarkable achievement. Food poisoning rates have plummeted. Childhood mortality from accidental poisoning has decreased dramatically, and we can now quietly feed billions of people with relatively few food safety incidents. But this comfortable safety net, it must be noted, comes with hidden costs. When Hurricane Katrina silently hit New Orleans, when supply chains tragically broke down during the early days of the pandemic, when natural disasters, with their sudden force, strike remote communities, we see how quickly our modern food security can, with chilling efficiency, crumble. Our ancestors, faced with similar profound disruptions, could quietly fall back on their deep, intimate knowledge of local ecosystems. They knew which bitter roots could patiently sustain them through famines, which toxic berries could be made safe through careful, meticulous processing, which seemingly inedible plants could provide crucial nutrients when conventional food sources tragically disappeared. Consider, for a quiet moment, the Inuit peoples of the Arctic, who still, remarkably, maintain some of this ancient knowledge. They know how to carefully process the toxic liver of polar bears, how to ferment fish in ways that would horrify modern food safety inspectors, but which create nutritionally dense foods that bravely prevent scurvy in environments where fresh vegetables are simply impossible to obtain. Their traditional methods of preserving and processing foods represent thousands of years of accumulated wisdom about surviving in one of Earth's most challenging environments. The same profound principles apply to indigenous communities worldwide. Aboriginal Australians still quietly know how to process cycad nuts, which contain compounds so toxic they can cause permanent neurological damage if prepared incorrectly. Yet, when processed properly through elaborate methods involving grinding, soaking, and fermentation that can, painstakingly, take weeks to complete, these nuts become a reliable source of carbohydrates in arid environments where few other starchy foods exist. What's particularly striking is how this invaluable knowledge was preserved and transmitted across generations without the benefit of written language. Every technique, every precise timing, every crucial detail was meticulously embedded in cultural practices, in ancestral stories, and in hands-on teaching. The margin for error was essentially zero. One single mistake in processing could mean swift death or permanent disability. Yet these communities maintained this knowledge for millennia, quietly suggesting a level of precision and understanding that rivals modern scientific approaches. This brings us to an uncomfortable truth about our current trajectory. Climate change is quietly pushing us toward a future where food security can no longer be simply taken for granted. Rising temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, and extreme weather events are already, relentlessly, disrupting agricultural systems worldwide. The plants our ancestors learned to process safely are often more resilient to environmental stress than our modern crops. Wild varieties of familiar foods frequently contain higher levels of nutrients and natural pesticides, the very toxins that our ancestors learned to neutralize. Cassava, for instance, is becoming increasingly important as a climate-resilient crop. It can grow in poor soils and drought conditions where corn and wheat tragically fail. Yet many people today don't know how to properly process it, leading to periodic outbreaks of cyanide poisoning in developing countries where traditional knowledge has tragically been lost. This pattern sadly repeats across many traditional food sources. The knowledge exists, but it's disappearing faster than we can document it. The solution isn't to abandon modern food safety practices or to return to a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Instead, we need to recognize that our ancestors' knowledge represents a vast library of biochemical processing techniques that could profoundly complement modern food science. Universities and research institutions are beginning to study traditional food processing methods, not just for their cultural value, but for their practical applications in food security and nutrition. Some of these ancient techniques are already being quietly integrated into modern food production. Fermentation, which our ancestors used to detoxify foods, is now recognized as a powerful tool for creating probiotics and enhancing nutritional value. Controlled sprouting and soaking techniques are being used to reduce anti-nutrients in grains and legumes. Even the practice of combining specific foods to neutralize toxins is being studied and applied in modern contexts. The key is meticulous documentation and widespread education. Every traditional food processing technique that disappears represents a profound loss of human knowledge that took generations to diligently develop. Community elders who still remember these methods are often the last link to this invaluable information, recording not just what they do, but precisely why they do it, how they learned it, and what subtle signs they look for during processing could preserve invaluable knowledge for future generations. For individuals, this doesn't of course mean you should start experimenting with toxic wild plants in your backyard. That would be incredibly dangerous without proper training and supervision, but understanding the underlying principles behind traditional food processing can make you a more informed consumer and a more resilient person. Learning basic fermentation, understanding how soaking and sprouting work, knowing which common foods contain natural toxins, and how cooking neutralizes them. These are practical skills that quietly connect us to our ancestral wisdom, while diligently maintaining modern safety standards. The story of what cavemen ate that would, without a doubt, claim our lives today, isn't really about the distant past. It is, profoundly, about the future. It's about recognizing that human survival has always depended on our innate ability to extract profound nutrition from challenging environments, and that this ability required sophisticated knowledge, careful observation, and precise technique. Our ancestors didn't just survive despite toxic foods. They thrived because they, with profound mastery, conquered them. So, what does this quiet journey mean for us today? We've become so utterly disconnected from our food sources that most people couldn't identify a safe mushroom from a deadly one, let alone know how to properly prepare toxic plants that could save their lives in a crisis. Our ancestors carried encyclopedic knowledge in their heads about which routes to avoid, how long to patiently soak bitter almonds, and exactly when cassava becomes safe to eat. This wasn't just survival trivia. It was, quite literally, the difference between life and death. The irony is striking. We have access to more nutritional information than any generation in history. Yet, we've lost the fundamental skills that kept humans alive for millennia. Our Paleolithic ancestors were walking biochemists, masters of food transformation, who could extract profound nutrition from the most unlikely and dangerous sources. They transformed poison into sustenance through pure ingenuity and careful observation. As we quietly face an uncertain future with climate change, profound supply chain disruptions, and growing food insecurity, perhaps it's time to reconnect with these ancient practices. The knowledge that sustained our species through ice ages and famines shouldn't be relegated to dusty anthropology textbooks. It should be part of our modern survival toolkit, bridging the profound gap between our high-tech present and our remarkably resourceful past. The knowledge that allowed our ancestors to disarm nature's most insidious botanical weapons, turning potential death into nourishing meals, is a testament to the profound ingenuity of the human spirit. They navigated a world where every bite was a calculated gamble, where the difference between a meal and a funeral often hinged on a single, precisely executed step. They understood the subtle language of the plants around them, discerning which ones held the promise of life and which harboured the insidious threat of death. This mastery wasn't born of abstract scientific principles, but from generations of painstaking observation, relentless experimentation, and an unwavering commitment to the survival of their lineage. Think of the collective memory required to transmit such complex, vital information without written language. It was woven into their stories, embedded in their rituals, and meticulously demonstrated through countless hours of hands-on teaching. A child learning to forage and prepare food wasn't just acquiring a skill. They were inheriting a vast living library of ancestral wisdom, passed down through the very fabric of their community. This communal aspect of knowledge was in itself a survival strategy. No single individual could possess all the information needed to navigate such a dangerous dietary landscape. It was a shared burden, a collective inheritance, a testament to the power of cooperation in the face of profound natural challenges. And yet, in our modern world, we have become isolated from this profound legacy. We rely on industrial systems and global supply chains, often oblivious to the intricate processes that transform raw ingredients into the safe, palatable foods we consume daily. The act of eating has become a passive experience, devoid of the deep connection and inherent risk that characterized the meals of our ancestors. We purchase food with a barcode scanner, assuming its safety, forgetting the millennia of human ingenuity and sacrifice that underpin that very assumption. The profound irony is that the very foods our ancestors mastered for survival often contained higher concentrations of vital nutrients and bioactive compounds than their domesticated, often diluted counterparts. These toxic plants were not just sustenance, they were powerful sources of health and resilience, if unlocked by the key of knowledge. This suggests that by losing the ability to interact with these wild, challenging food sources, we may have also, unknowingly, forfeited certain biological capacities and a unique form of ecological intelligence that once defined our species. Our gut microbiomes, our liver enzymes, perhaps even our sensory perceptions may have evolved in constant dialogue with these complex naturally occurring compounds. Modern diets, so often characterized by uniformity and sterility, may be leaving us, in subtle ways, biologically less adaptable than our ancient predecessors. The true measure of human advancement perhaps isn't just our ability to conquer nature, but our capacity to understand it, to to work with its inherent complexities and to extract its benefits while mitigating its dangers. Our ancestors embodied this principle with a profound elegance that we are only now beginning to appreciate. Their diet wasn't just about calories. It was about a continuous, intimate conversation with the ecosystem, a dance between human ingenuity and natural bounty. Every processed root, every leached nut, every cooked berry was a verse in this ongoing dialogue, a testament to their deep respect for the profound power of nature. And as we look to a future fraught with ecological uncertainty, this ancient dialogue, this forgotten language of survival, may prove to be humanity's most invaluable inheritance. It is a reminder that the solutions to future challenges may lie not just in new technologies, but in rediscovering ancient wisdom, the wisdom of those who saw potential in poison and life in the very heart of danger. It is a humbling thought, a quiet call to reconnect with the profound legacy of resilience and ingenuity that courses through our very veins. May this journey into their ancient menu bring you a deep and peaceful rest as you ponder the silent strength of those who came before. The narrative of our ancestors, the cavemen, is often simplified to tales of spear-wielding hunters and primitive gatherers, but the true story revealed us a quiet dust of archaeological digs and the subtle chemical residues on ancient tools is far more sophisticated and far more unsettling. They weren't just trying to survive the Ice Age, they were eating foods that would literally kill you today. While we, in our modern world, may panic about gluten or meticulously worry about organic labels, humans living 30,000 years ago were casually consuming enough cyanide to drop a modern adult in mere minutes. They were munching on plants so profoundly toxic that a single handful could, with chilling efficiency, shut down your nervous system forever. And yet, somehow, they thrived. This is not some exaggerated survival story. This is documented fact. Archaeological evidence clearly shows our Paleolithic ancestors regularly consumed foods containing lethal levels of natural toxins. These were foods that modern humans have painstakingly bred, processed, and sanitized into the harmless versions we know today. Foods that would send you to the emergency room if you grabbed them straight from the wild today. But here's what's truly mind-bending, a profound thought to ponder as you drift. They didn't just survive these deadly meals, they figured out how to process them safely, using nothing but the raw power of fire, the boundless gift of patience and knowledge meticulously passed down through countless generations. They developed detoxification techniques so sophisticated that modern food scientists are still quietly studying them. They transformed nature's poison into their daily bread. The archaeological record from sites across Europe, Africa, and Asia reveals a consistent pattern that profoundly challenges everything we think we know about the prehistoric diet. From cyanide-packed wild almonds in the Mediterranean to toxic cassava roots in Africa, from lectin-loaded kidney beans to solanine-rich wild potatoes, our ancestors were, in essence, running a daily chemistry experiment with their meals. Take wild almonds, for instance. The bitter almonds that grew naturally across ancient landscapes contained levels of amygdalin that break down into hydrogen cyanide when chewed. We're talking about concentrations that could kill an adult human with just 50 nuts. For a child, even fewer. Yet, archaeological evidence from Paleolithic sites quietly shows these were a regular part of the human diet. The processing methods they developed read like a manual for advanced chemistry. They learned that specific heating temperatures could neutralize certain toxins. They discovered that soaking, grinding, and fermenting in precise sequences could transform deadly plants into nutritious food. They figured out which parts of toxic plants were safe and which would, with chilling efficiency, kill you instantly. Consider cassava, still eaten by millions today, but only after extensive processing. The wild varieties our ancestors encountered contained enough cyanogenic glycosides to cause paralysis, nerve damage, and death. Yet they developed multi-step detoxification processes so effective that they're still used in the Amazon today, thousands of years later. But perhaps the most shocking discovery comes from dental calculus analysis. Scientists can now extract and identify plant materials stuck in the ancient teeth. What they're finding rewrites the story of human survival. Our ancestors weren't just eating these dangerous foods occasionally out of desperation. They were consuming them regularly, systematically as dietary staples. The really disturbing part, the quiet thought that lingers, is that many of these plants are still around today, growing wild in the very same regions. The profound difference is we've forgotten how to process them safely. The knowledge our ancestors spent millennia perfecting has been lost to most of modern humanity. We've become so dependent on agriculture and industrial food processing that we've lost the fundamental ability to survive on what our ancestors considered normal food. Raw kidney beans, for example, contain phytohemagglutinin at levels that can cause severe toxicity with just 4 or 5 beans. Yet, legumes were found at Paleolithic sites worldwide. Our ancestors knew something we've forgotten about preparation methods that neutralize these natural toxins. The implications are staggering. Modern humans, with all our technology and scientific knowledge, are actually less capable of surviving in the natural world than our so-called primitive ancestors. We've traded essential survival skills for fleeting convenience. We've exchanged